Hey everybody, it's Joe G from the new 8-Bit Heroes. Thanks for checking out this video about NESmaker, the tool set that we built to create actual hardware playable cartridge-based NES games without ever having to write a line of code. Alright everybody, today we are going to look at how to create objects, monsters, things that you interact with, NPCs. We're going to look at some real basic stuff today because this is really a core part of the engine and the tool, and there's a lot of moving parts to it. And I just kind of want to give a summary, glance over the whole thing, but I want to show you how you can create a monster graphically, create its behaviors, and toss it in the game without having to get into the code. First, I want to take a look at, we have two monster graphics banks, and each one of these banks has tile sets. We're looking at tile set 0 inside the first bank, and right now it is completely blank. I've made a blank one so you can just see how we can create new graphic assets without leaving the tool. Some of you might want to work in Photoshop or another tool, and there's a way to do that. And in a future tutorial, we're going to show you how to get graphics to here and put them in the right places and stuff. And we're also making that even easier as we refine the tool. But for right now, let's take a look at the tools that we have right here. It's just like the tile editor. Right now, I'm looking at tile 0, and it's just a 1 tile by 1 tile. If I were to edit it, the first thing I would do is I'd want to make a palette. Now, these don't interfere with the background palettes. The monsters have their own palettes. The objects have their own palettes. So let's just say I wanted to make a monster 1 palette, and I'm going to change its colors to like brown and pink and blue. I don't know. And so I could go ahead and let's say I want to make sort of a ghost type Pac-Man-y thing. I don't have a lot of room to work with here. It's just an 8 by 8 tile, but I can make something like this. And I can fill it in peach. And you can see how easy it is to create graphics with this. It's just a pencil tool. Nothing tricky. I'll give them some eyes. Like that. So now I got this little really, really crappy 8-bit ghost. I save it. And you can see there's my little ghost right there. That's fine. Let me make it a little bit more interesting. I could make it 2 tiles tall instead of 1. If I were to edit this now, wouldn't do me much good, because if I started to edit one of these, you can see they both get edited because they're both using tile 0. So I'm going to save this. And that's not what I wanted to do. I want this to be represented by that tile underneath it right there. So I'm going to edit that, and now when I make changes to this, it's actually editing the tile underneath it here. So first thing is I'm going to extend this down a little bit like that, and maybe I'll round off the head a little bit like this, and maybe I'll lower those eyes in a second too. And I'm going to make this kind of come way down like this, and I'll make it a little more jagged and a little more interesting. And I'll make this all pink or peach. And I'll give them some eyes, and they'll be more towards the center. And maybe now I'll give them a little mouth, off center mouth too, like that. I could even make that darker and give them eyeballs and whatever. Maybe eyebrows, angry eyebrows. Now we have an angry, cheesy 8-bit ghost. Save him. Great. Cool. And now I can see I've got my tile set filling out. This is the monster I'm working with right now. It's a horrible looking monster. Please forgive my cheap art. So that's how we can easily create a frame of animation for this guy. I could also make the animation here, and we have 4 frames of animation for all objects, and that's kind of limited, but that's how our engine works. There are really clever ways that you could get a lot more, that you could get up to 32 frames of animation if you really wanted to. But we are just going to deal with, for most cases, 4 frames of animation we found has been good and easy to work with in the code. So I'm going to make a quick flipping back and forth animation. I'm going to copy this frame. I'm going to go to frame 2 and I'm going to paste it. Oops. I'm in frame 2 and I'm going to flip it. So now his mouth and his bottom tendrils there are gonna flip. I'm gonna go to frame 3 and I'm gonna paste it. And I'm gonna go to frame 4. I'm gonna paste it and flip it. And now what I'll get is that will be my animation. and that's just him facing down. And I can go ahead and I can call that monster down is his default animation, and there we go. Okay, so we want to add also the ghost moving up and the ghost moving left and the ghost moving right, and we're going to do these really simple. That's why I chose a simple shape. So let's add the monster moving up, and I'm going to go ahead and just paste the frame in here like this, and I need new frames of this guy moving upwards. So I need almost like a duplicate of this, of him moving upwards. So I'm going to do this, and I'm going to edit this in like this. When he goes up, let's see. Oops. When he goes up, we're not going to see any of the eyes or anything like that. That black. But maybe I'll have like these little trails at the bottom so you can kind of tell he's still there, that he's moving the other way. I'm going to save those modified tiles. Now we have these, and I want to do the same thing. I'm going to copy, paste, and flip. Paste, paste, and flip. So now monster up is going to look like that. I want left and right, and I only need to make one of those. So for this, I'm going to say monster left. Watch this. So I go add, and I want monster left to be this. Let's go to frame 1 just to keep this sane. This and this one, and I'm going to edit that. And I want to make my ghost look like he's moving left. I'm going to actually give him sort of like a little shape to his face so you can see that he's moving that way. And based on where his eyes will be positioned, you should be able to tell that he's moving that way. Great. I don't know if I put his eyes in the right spot or not. Let's just leave that off. So, this should sort of suggest that he's moving that way. Something like that. That suggests he's moving left. I'm going to save these modified tiles. Like I said, this isn't high art here. The problem with this is that I can't just flip it to show the animation. I want to change fundamentally his bottom graphic. So real quick, let me do that. I'm going to edit. Now it's editing that tile. So I'm going to, make this one look decidedly different. And I'm not saying this is good. I'm just saying that it'll demo the animation, how we can set up the animations. Okay, save modified tiles. Okay, and we've got this extra down. So with this guy, with him moving left, I want to start with this frame, and then in frame, I'm going to copy that, and in frame 3, I want it to be the same, so I'm going to paste it there. But in frames 2 and 4, I want it to show this, and this second frame of animation here, I'm going to copy that, and on frame 4, I'm going to paste it there. So now what we can get is, he'll kind of look like this, it'll kind of look like he's moving that way or whatever. Great. And I'm going to copy, this is going to be a little messy, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to make monster right, and I'm going to add that. And now with monster right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my flip function. So I can flip it horizontally. Flip it horizontally. Oops. Sorry. Flip it horizontally. Flip it horizontally. I'm going to copy that and put it in frame 3. And then flip it horizontally. And I'm going to use this second frame. and flip it horizontally and copy that and put it in frame 4. So now, if I'm moving right, he looks like that. Okay, so let's just show how we could set up a basic dumb AI for this character. We have one movement, 4 different directions, and I'm going to go into my animation info. And I only have one action, and that's default. I'll rename it to float or something, or walk, whatever. And that's the only animation type I had. If I had more animation types, I could define them here and define what graphics go with what animations. And maybe I'll show that in a second. But basically, if he's moving down, I want him to show down. If he's moving down right, I think I still want him to show down. If he's moving right, I want him to show right. If he's moving up and right, I want him to show up. If he's moving up, I want him to show up. If he's moving left up, I want him to show up. If he's moving left, I want him to show left. And if he's moving down left, I want him to show down. That's just, that's sort of how these look the best. I noticed that when they're moving vertically, up or down, even if they're moving at a diagonal, it looks better if they're facing up or down. Anyway, so that's how I set up which graphics. When he chooses one of these directions, I now have a graphic that's associated with that direction. Details. Okay, how tall is this character in pixels? Because our engine implicitly has a 2.5D mechanic, I need to define the depth, the actual depth that I want this to feel like it is, and that's, for this character, 16 pixels. Normal max speed, I'll make it 10. Acceleration speed, I'll make it a fast acceleration speed because I don't want it to seem like he's willowy, he's on ice or something like that. As a ghost, I can actually show you what the difference of what if I put that down lower. 0 jump speed, let's give him 3 health and 1 experience, 1 strength, 1 defense. Then we have his reaction to what happens in this environment. If he hits a solid object, I want him to reverse direction. I don't have to. Maybe I want to make it look like it's a bigger world, so he gets to the edge and he disappears. I could actually make him, I could destroy himself when he gets to the edge, and that will look to us like he's going off the screen and things like that. For right now, though, I just want him to reverse his direction. If he gets to a solid object, if he gets to the edge, I just want him to reverse direction. Hurt type, normal. Spawn type, random. This is actually probably going to be set somewhere else, but for some monsters you need this this byte here. Actions. This is where I think it gets really interesting. Each object can have 8 frames of sort of modular behavior. And so the first thing is setting an animation speed. I'm going to give him kind of a faster animation speed. The lower this number is, that's the time between frames. So the lower the number is, the faster it actually animates. I chose my animation types. I named them here. I only have one, so it's the only option. And now I can define his actions for all 8 steps. So for step 0, his action is he's going to move 4 directions or 8 directions. He's going to choose one of the 8 directions, one of these 8 directions, and he's going to move that way. He's going to start moving in that direction. A timer is set. At the end of that timer, it's going to advance action. And I'm going to repeat that. Animation speed, float, change 8 directions, end action, advance action. Here, I'm going to have him keep animate. I'm going to have him animate a lot slower, let's say. And I'm going to have him stop for a second. At the end of the action, I'm going to have him advance action. So what that'll do is then at the... Actually, you know what? Never mind, we're going to do this. At the end of that animation, he's going to go to 0 action. So now what will happen is he'll animate relatively fastly and move in a random direction. Then he'll change direction. And then once this step is over, he's going to stop moving and start animating real slow. We're going to actually see the frames. And when he gets to the last frame, it's going to repeat. It's going to go back to the beginning. So he's going to compete. He's going to do this cycle over and over again. And in fact, I'm going to make it so when he's standing still, you can't hurt him. And if you attack him, he hurts you. So I'm going to make him invincible. These are actions that we have for our game, changing direction, burrowing into the ground, ascending into the air, and diving and shooting at the player and shooting straight, teleporting, all these things, and more. And those are all defined by what is in this folder. And this is an example of what one of those actions is. So this is the random direction one, moving in random direction. You can get in and you can change this so that, and you can even change what it's called. So like we have it called change a direction. You could change what that behavior is called and how it works. And when your monster gets to that action step, he will perform that action that you're coding in there. Last thing, we could set a hitbox. So maybe I can only hit him in the head or something like that. And I can define a hitbox. We don't want to do that. And we will set a bounding box. Because it's a 2.5D game, I want to be able to sort of walk behind him. So I'm going to set this up as my bounding box. Okay, so I have that. And I'm going to save this guy as Mon1. Could save him as Ghost or whatever I wanted to call it. I'm going to save that. And you can see it shows up in my monsters. In order to put him in the game, I've got to create a monster group. And he was in tile set 0. So I'm going to say that in this group called Ghosts, whatever I want to call it, Mon1 is the only thing that can show up. So it doesn't mean that Monster 1 is always going to be this and Monster 2 is always going to be this and Monster not necessarily at all. What it means is that these are the only monsters associated with that group. So now if I save that, you can see I have a monster group called Ghosts, and I can go to the overworld and I can say, all right, I want to set up the monsters that appear in the daytime as ghosts. And I want my palette to be this Mon1 palette. Now, here's where the palette thing gets a little bit confusing. When I was creating the monster, I was just using a reference palette. That's not necessarily what's going to show up in my screen. For instance, if I had this palette selected, this is the color that my ghost would end up being. Even though when I created them, I told them I wanted them this color, the screen is what's defining the object palettes, not the actual object. The screen is defining what colors the objects are drawn. So I want them to be that peachy color with brown and blue. I'm going to choose that. And I'm not going to put night monsters or anything like that. We're not going to worry about that. I'm going to hit OK. So now I can see these are my day monsters. Over here would be my night monsters. These are right now not in play, and if I want to determine where I put them, I can right click on the screen, and I could place them. Oops. Where I want to put them. This one's always tricky. There. Now, I could also have them placed randomly. So I could look at edit monster placement details. And right now I've got a monster placement. Instead, I could say that I want them randomly. And here you're choosing, these are the different monsters that are in that group. And you're saying that Monster 1 could be any one of these 4. Monster 2 could be any one of these 4. Monster 3 could be any one of these 4. It's a little bit complex until I start adding more monsters so you can really see what I'm talking about. But just know that if I wanted 2 of these always to, like, this is great for a boss. Let's say I wanted, this is my boss and these were my normal monsters. I could say that monster number 1 is only ever the boss. And monsters 2 and 3 can only be these guys, 2, 3, or 4, or 2, 3, or 4. And so I'd have my boss show up and 2 monsters, and they'd randomly be one of these 3 types of monsters. It's a cool way to handle bosses for this. It doesn't really matter because they're all the same. I'm going to hit OK. Now they're going to randomly show up because I hit random. I could also make them show up from the edge. I'm going to go with random. And now I'm just going to play the game and test them. And how they should behave is they should move randomly, then change direction, then stop. And when they're stopped, I can't hurt them. All right. In fact, to really demonstrate what happens when they're stopped, I'm going to make a new frame, and I'm going to add one called Monster 1 Stop. And I'm going to add that to my animations. And Monster 1 Stop is going to use these graphics. However, it's going to be blinking. It's going to be flashing. And the way I'm going to make it flash is I'm going to use a different second palette. So I'll even use this this one. Sure. No, I'll just use never mind. I'll use a darker version of what colors they are. So it'll turn into this. So frame 1 will look like that. Frame 2 will, oops, sorry. Let's copy that. Frame 2 will look like that. Frame 3, we'll paste it, will look like that. And frame 4, paste it, will look like that. And you know what? I'm going to go into my animation info, and I'm going to say that he's got a different type of animation, and I'm going to call it Monster Invincible. And when he's invincible, he's not showing Monster Up in it. He's showing Monster Stop, that animation I just made. So no matter which way he's facing, he's going to look like he's all of a sudden changed to facing downward, and he's doing that flashing. All right. And in my actions for when he stopped, instead of showing the float, I'm going to have him showing the Monster Invincible. All right. Okay. Now, the last thing I've got to change is I added that second color palette, and this is what I was talking about a second ago. Right now, you can see object palette number 1 and object palette number 2, they're both showing the same palette. So what's going to happen is it's not going to flash. It's just going to stay the same color because it's going to ping pong back and forth between these two palettes. If I want to do it to do the thing that I told it to do over here, I need to set that second palette. Now, when it flashes, it's going to ping pong between these values. So that's what I was saying earlier about the screen controls the colors, not the monster creator over here. So let's go ahead and test this. Let's check out what happens with the monsters. So we're going to hit test. It's going to bring up the assembler. Take a couple of seconds to assemble the game, and then launch it in our custom emulator. Mystic Search's default screens come up, and then we're in the game. And there's our monsters, and we're going to see they're going to stop and they're going to start to flash. Oh, it's really quick, but did you see it? So let's say I want to extend that. Let's say I want to extend the length of their flash. Instead of just waiting for the animation to be end, I'm going to just edit that real quick. So I'm going to, instead of doing it this way, I'm going to have this advance its action. So it's going to go a whole timer cycle instead of just an animation cycle. And I'm going to use Monster Invincible, animation speed of 10, and now it's going to go at the end of animation to 0 action. So it's going to go a whole cycle of behavior, and then it's going to jump to this, which will be that really quick, and then go to action 0. This is one way to do it. It's a quick, easy way to do it. Also, I noticed there was a problem with collision. One of these are showing up as shallow water. I never actually changed these. So I'm going to hold down my 0 key, and I'm going to change these paths. Notice the paths look exactly like the shallow water, but they're a different color. So I just needed to change this. And now if I hold my mouse over it, you can see these say up here, they say shallow water, and these up here say normal. So that shouldn't happen again. So let's test. And now when the monster is in that flashing state, I won't be able to hurt him. And you saw how quickly I was able to make the change that I wanted without having to dig into the assembly, just using the intuitive controls to make those changes. We'll compile. I'll hit start. We're in the Mystic Search's default screen, and there's my monsters. And you're going to see them stop and flash, and I can't hit them when they're flashing. Now they hurt me. Let me kill one. I just turned to night. So that's a basic look at how you can create monsters and objects. We're going to get a lot deeper into those menus as time goes on, but that's a nice little sort of first blush look at how we handle creating monsters, how we handle their behaviors and their animations. Next time we're going to look at expanding this world and adding some NPCs that can actually give you some story context. If you want to see more videos about NESmaker and how to create your own NES games, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and help us get the word out further by sharing this video on social media.